You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, everybody? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Today, we're going to be having another 1 hour or more episode. I'm going to be covering 2 UFC events, plus we have quite a bit to talk about, quite a bit to discuss today, but to just start things off, we'll start with last week's UFC card that I didn't cover. I got a little busy and decided that I just decided to save it for this week when this UFC card went off, the Brunson versus Holland card, so we'll talk about that in a bit, but I just wanted to start things off with last week's card, which was a main event between Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad, which was originally supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev, but obviously I covered it on last podcast. Khamzat has retired, or so far he has retired due to complications from COVID, so it's a little heartbreaking, I'd say, I guess, because he's young. He's 26 years old, and his career is just starting to skyrocket. He's undefeated. He's got this incredible hype behind him, and it's stopped not by an opponent, not by another guy, but from a virus that the entire world is fighting right now. So that was really unfortunate. But anyway, we got Leon Edwards in the octagon again, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I wanted to talk about the whole main card. And starting off the main card, we had a wacky start to the main card, actually. The first fight on the main card was a fight between Eryk Anders and Darren Stewart, which was actually guaranteed to be a great fight, a banger, and Darren Stewart was either gonna, put somebody out and wrestle them to the floor, or same thing with Eryk Anders, because both guys got power. And that's exactly what we were seeing in the contest. Eryk Anders, okay, so after a couple minutes, I'd say like a minute or two of a little bit of a back and forth, both guys feeling each other out, Eryk Anders started to, he hit, I think, like a left hook or something, hurt Darren Stewart, backed him up against the cage, and just started pummeling him with shots, started dropping him, and every time Darren Stewart would get back up to his feet, he'd be, covering up and getting pummeled by shots. He'd knock him down again, and while Darren Stewart was on the ground against the cage, I believe, actually, Darren Stewart was standing, and Eryk Anders had him in a clinch, and Darren Stewart dropped to his knees, and Eryk Anders went to knee him as Darren Stewart, had his points of contact on the canvas. So he ended up landing an illegal knee. Fortunately for Eryk Anders, though, he didn't get a disqualification loss for it because they deemed it unintentional, which, if you watch the actual foul ring out in real time, it was clear it was a heat of the moment knee. Like, it wasn't like it was last time with Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan, where, the ref didn't clarify specifically that Darren Stewart was grounded. With Peter Yan, he specifically clarified that Aljamain was downed, and Peter Yan still went for it. So, that was deemed intentional. But this one fortunately was deemed intentional, or unintentional, sorry. And it ended up being a draw, which is really unfortunate, though, because Eryk Anders was on his way to what was essentially a TKO victory. He had Darren Stewart hurt against the cage. You don't know in the heat of the moment, but he just shouldn't have went for that knee, I guess. But it was a really fun fight, nonetheless. Just a really wacky end to it, especially a week after we just crowned a new bantamweight champion due to the exact same foul. So it was just a little weird to experience that, and that being the first fight of the main card. And the prelims went fine, but this fight on the main card was a little bit of a foreshadowing, and I'll get into it in a bit. But the next fight on the card was a flyweight bout between Manuel Kopp and Matheus Nicolau. And yet again, I'm just going to say it because it's really short and sweet with this one. I'm just going to get short and sweet with this one. this was very disappointing in the term of I was excited to see Manuel Cop, whatever, just rally back from his decision loss to what is essentially a incredibly like high top contender in Alejandro Pantoja. And I thought, it was probably just the UFC jitters a little bit, and he just needed to get his footing. And in the second fight, he was going to get that. Unfortunately, the entire fight was Manuel Cop trying to counter-strike while Mateus Nicolau took him down and just walked him down and just controlled the entire cage for the most part, while Manuel Cop just waited for those shots, waited for those combos. And it was just really disappointing to me because that's two performances now where he has done exactly that. He has waited for the other opponent to open up, but as soon as the other opponent opens up, he's never been able to do anything with it, or he just doesn't try to do anything with it. And, he lost via decision yet again. And it wasn't close, I'm going to be honest. It could have been like a 29-28. I could see how somebody may have seen Manuel Cop win one round or something, because it wasn't a complete wash, but it was a clear Mateus Nicolau win. And it was just disappointing, especially since Manuel Cop is the former risen flyweight or bantamweight champion, and he had a lot of hype coming behind him coming into this promotion. So I was just a little upset with how he performed in both of these fights. So anyway, going further onto the card, we have a bantamweight bout between Jonathan Martinez and Davy Grant, and this was a fun fight. I'm not going to lie. This fight was actually really exciting. Both guys were throwing bombs, and it was back and forth between both guys. It was just one of those fights where somebody was going out and both guys brought it. Both guys were fast. It was very fast paced. I really enjoyed it. Davy Grant ended up scoring the TKO at the near the end of round 2. Not like 4 minutes and like whatever seconds, like 3 minutes in, but still with like a minute or two to spare, and ended up scoring the win. But it was a fun fight. I really enjoyed it, and it really set the mood for the next fight, because on paper this fight was guaranteed to be a fun fight and a complete firework show, and we got that, but it was a very quick one. So the next fight on the card was a featherweight bout between Dan Ige and Gavin Tucker. Dan Ige obviously coming off of a loss to Calvin Kattar, I believe, which he survived all the rounds. Maybe it wasn't Calvin Kattar now that I'm thinking about it. But Dan Ige, just coming off of a loss, he's very well known for just throwing down in the octagon and just leaving his heart and soul in there and having heavy power. And that's exactly what he did coming into this bout. Gavin Tucker obviously coming in with a big chip on his shoulder, representing Canada, and there's no doubt about it. Dan Ige is a big opponent for Gavin Tucker going into this bout. Absolutely no slouch. The type of guys that Gavin Tucker has come up against in the UFC is nowhere near the caliber that Dan Ige has come up against. So it was just one of those. I think it was Dan Hooker. Now that I'm thinking about it. Either Dan Hooker or Calvin Kattar. I think it was Calvin Kattar, actually. But anyway, Dan Ige just has that, mentality, where that veteran mentality and that killer mentality where it's either kill or be killed. And he has that chin that makes him so hard to put away. And that power that just makes him deadly. And he showcased that coming into this bout, where he just finished Gavin Tucker. After letting Gavin Tucker kind of feel himself out and feeling Gavin Tucker out, he lunged forward and finished Gavin Tucker within 22 seconds with just a brutal KO. And it was a great performance by Dan Ige, and it was just unfortunate for the fellow Canadian and my brother Gavin Tucker. But I'm not gonna lie, as a fan, I expected that to happen. I didn't expect the fight to be that quick. I expected a Dan Ige knockout, but I expected it to be a little bit more back and forth. But you can't underestimate a guy like Dan Ige. He's got the striking, he's got the power, and he's got that heart. So That was a great performance by Dan Ige, and it really set the tune for our light heavyweight bout between Misha Serkinov and Ryan Spann. So 2 KOs in a row. Are we going to get 3? Well, we got 3, and it actually came just as quickly, not as quickly actually, because the Dan Ige knockout was 22 seconds, but it came fairly quickly in the first round. Ryan Spann finished Misha Serkinov by KO in the first round, like 1 minute and 11 seconds or 12 seconds, something like that, in the first round. And that brought us to the main event that everybody was excited for. Everybody was expecting a wash, but they were excited for it because one guy hasn't fought since 2019 because he's been either injured or just churning down all types of contenders. And now he really wants to fight, and the guy that he's supposed to derail gets, well, not injured, but he pulls out because he contracts COVID. And then he retires, but then Bully B, Bilal Muhammad, steps in and takes the fight on short notice after fighting a hard-fought fight in his last bout. So what are we going to get? So we got a wash, I'm going to be honest. Bully B handled himself very well in his first main event, but Leon Edwards, just clearly the better fighter, the better kickboxer, was just piecing up Bilal Muhammad, making his takedowns like incredibly hard, just showcasing that great takedown defense and just completely beating up Bilal Muhammad. I believe in the first round he scored an eye poke that had Bilal Muhammad kind of waiting a little bit, and Leon Edwards then scored another one, which, you know, warranted a warning for a point deduction from the ref. Going into the second round, though, I guess Bilal Muhammad was lunging forward to throw a punch, and Leon Edwards was trying to counter it, had his fingers out, got Bilal, and it was deemed unintentional, but Bilal could not continue due to the eye poke. 18 seconds in the round 2. So, unfortunately, the fight was deemed a draw. Even though Leon Edwards won the first round soundly, it was deemed a draw, and the fight was deemed a no contest because of the eye poke. Just similar to the first fight on the main card with Eric Anders and Darren Stewart, where Anders scored that unintentional knee, and unfortunately for him, his incredible showcase turned into a no contest, so no winners were chosen, unfortunately. But anyway, with that behind us, how was the Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad card despite those two little setbacks, especially that wacky finish in the main event? Because I'm gonna be honest here, as a fan, as a fighter, as someone who's been training that much, you know, you don't want that to happen. As a fan myself, I didn't want that to happen. As a fan, you want to see a great fight between both guys. You don't want to see it end that way. It's such a cheap way to end a fight. Like, I mean, I'm bringing up UFC 244 despite, obviously, Jorge Masvidal beating up on Nate Diaz, but a lot of people were upset with how the fight ended because Nate Diaz was still clearly in the fight, but the doctor ended it due to a cut. And, you know, you don't want the fight to end that way, but obviously there's, you know, you got to do it to protect the fighter, and obviously they've implemented rules to stop these eye pokes and everything, but it's hard. It's hard to remember to keep your eyes not outstretched and to get into that habit, especially with the actual gloves on, because the gloves kind of outstretch your fingers a tiny bit with its design and the padding on the palms or whatever you want to call it. It's hard. You know, you need a different design that makes it difficult for eye pokes to actually ever happen. But, you know, until that happens, these things are going to happen. But despite all that, the card actually was pretty decent. We got a pretty fun fight in the first fight of the main card, despite it ending the way it did. The flyweight fight was a bust, but the bantamweight bout between Jonathan Martinez and Davey Grant was pretty fucking great and ended pretty swell. We had a spectacular knockout with Dan Ige, a spectacular finish by Ryan Spann, and the prelims were actually pretty good too, with chock full of finishes and decent fights. So all in all, like, despite the card ending the way it did, the fights were pretty worth watching. but nothing to shake a stick at, to be honest. But that's it for the last week's card. We'll talk about this week's card in a bit. I have a couple things to talk about before we get into this week's card, though. First up is some big news that broke earlier this week. Khabib Nurmagomedov, as we know, a while back, at UFC, what was it? I want to say like 254. I think UFC 254. After he beat Justin Gaethje, he announced that he was retiring from the sport of MMA at 29-0, at I believe like 31 years old or something like that. And a lot of people were mixed on it, but for the reason that he did it was pretty sweet. Obviously his father passed during the training camp leading up to the Justin Gaethje fight. His father passed due to complications of COVID. We covered that in a much earlier podcast. My heart still goes out to Khabib and his mother for dealing with that loss. Khabib's father was his ref, not his ref, his fucking trainer, his coach, the guy who got him into the sport and pretty much taught him his base where he learned from his sambo and just trained so many other people in his team and kind of helped pave this way that Khabib's on now. And it was kind of both of their dreams. And now that he's, achieved that dream and, he wants to retire undefeated as that last part of that dream, he's got nothing to do anymore. He no longer has anything to fight for. He doesn't want any legacy fights. He's happy with his record. He did it for his father and he enjoys it too, but it was something him and his father shared. I get that. His mother wanted him to stop because it was something him and his father loved, and I get that. So earlier this week, it was official. Dana even admitted it and announced it. Khabib Nurmagomedov has officially retired. As of saying this, I mean, obviously before, because the news broke a little bit earlier this week, but as of recording this, Khabib Nurmagomedov has retired, and even today he has expressed that he has always planned to retire. He never had any interest to come back. So it is official. The lightweight title is now vacant. He is no longer he's probably still contracted under the UFC, but he's no longer obligated to fight any UFC fights. He's retired from the sport in general. He can now take care of his family, do all the things he does in Dagestan, and he also has EFC, that Russian, I believe it's Russian, or it might be Saudi Arabian. I think it's Russian. He's got EFC, that Russian promotion, to deal with now since he bought them out and he's running it now, so he's got business ventures to take care of. He's busy, so he's got a life for himself outside of this. And like I said, with that leaves the lightweight title vacant, which brings us into our next little piece of news. Not admitted. Again, I almost said admitted. Jesus fucking Christ, what's wrong with me today? Announced earlier this week, or later this week, actually. I believe it was around like Wednesday or Thursday it was announced. The vacant lightweight title will be fought for at UFC 262 on May 15th between former Bellator lightweight champion Michael Chandler and the man who embarrassed Tony Ferguson for a second time, Charles Oliveira. So these two are going to fight for a title. And a lot of people are pissed off because a lot of people believe that Dustin Poirier, that he deserves the title shot because of everything he's done. He's on his win streak. He dismantled Conor. Everybody. He's bona fide the number one contender in the lightweight division. However, I'm happy with this fight because, part of me doesn't like that it's Chandler fighting on the other side of Charles Oliveira. But Chandler, former Bellator lightweight champion, he's only fought pretty much top competition until the UFC, and then they put him in front of top competition, and he dismantled that top competition and Dan Hooker very easily. So I could see the argument for the title fight, but Charles Oliveira deserves to be here because the man is on, I believe, like a 7 or 8 fight winning streak now. His last fight being that just complete dominant decision victory over Tony Ferguson. Just out-grappled him, out-struck him in every facet of the game. Had Tony just doing some wacky shit to try and, like, you know, salvage the fight. It was just one of those fights where it was really sad as a Tony fan to watch, but, you know, as a guy who wants to see Charles Oliveira, you know, up and coming in his win streak, you know, it was nice to see him get as dominant as a win, you know, as he did. So that was really nice to see. But that brings the question, because now that Chandler and Oliveira are fighting for the lightweight title, what is going to go on for Dustin Poirier? Does that mean that Conor versus Poirier 3 is in the works now? Because Dustin did say he wants that red panty night. He has said, even though he would like to fight for the title, he would love that payday first. Because obviously, yeah, having the gold around your waist and being the bona fide lightweight champion would be nice in such a stacked division, of course. But you know, you want to get that payday against the sport's biggest star at the moment, especially after you're reeling off of a very dominant knockout of him in the second round. The first round was pretty even, but that second round, Dustin Poirier just really started to pop off and just started to really get his pace and his groove and just finished Conor like it was nothing. And, you know, reeling off of that finish, he's going to want that payday and that possible easy win again. But obviously with Conor also wants that fight, so it's a guaranteed fight offer, guaranteed pay-per-view main event with fans, and everyone's happy all around because Conor gets his rematch to potentially put Dustin away and put an end to this trilogy, and Dustin gets his payday and gets to put an end to this trilogy potentially by knocking out Conor again or winning a decision or something. We'll see how it goes if it's announced, but the potential for this fight has gotten higher now that the vacant lightweight title is up for grabs by Chandler and Oliveira. Obviously, now the fight to make is either Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 2, which would be nice to see because both guys have improved since their last outing, and their last outing was so fucking fun. I guarantee it's going to be a fun fight if you book that. And if you haven't seen that fight, go watch it, please. It was fucking awesome. But anyway, that fight, Justin Gaethje and Poirier, less likely because, like I said, Poirier's been talking about a red panty night, wanting to rematch Conor. And now they've got that fight. Now that two other guys are fighting for the lightweight title, now they can do that fight with no legit consequences and not making the fans mad because only one guy deserves to fight for the title while Conor's over here reeling off of a loss to the actual lightweight while his last win was a welterweight that is pretty easy to TKO at this point in his career. So that being said, my question is not the potential of the fight, because to me, I think the fight's going to happen. I think the fight is destined to happen now that the lightweight title is up for grabs by a different group of guys. I think that this could be a number one contender fight, though. That is my question. Will this be a number one contender fight? Because I think even though, you know, Conor's coming off of a loss to Dustin Poirier, Conor's still in the top 5 as much as I don't like to admit it. And Poirier is the number one contender. So if Conor wins, Conor puts an end to that trilogy, beats the number one contender, and skyrockets himself to number one contenders, number one contender status. But if Dustin Poirier knocks out Conor, he stays the number one contender, solidifies that his next title shot with a second defeat or a second victory over Conor McGregor, who completely just wiped the floor with him at featherweight. So, you know, everybody still, holds Conor in this high regard. So a second win back-to-back over Conor McGregor while you're the number one contender would definitely skyrocket him to an immediate title shot against whoever wins between Chandler and Oliveira in my book. So I feel like that would be the fight to make, because as much as I hate Conor and as much as I hate that Conor is still top 4, there is title shot implications for both guys that could be made, as much as the Conor side is a little bit harder to make because obviously he's railing off of a loss. His last win at lightweight was 2016 against Eddie Alvarez. And his last fight at lightweight was against Khabib, who submitted him in the third or fourth round after dominating him pretty soundly for a majority of the fight. So, it's kind of harder to make that case for Conor, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely there for Dustin Poirier. But speaking of fights that could be going on, this one was actually confirmed, and then it got ripped away from us as fast as it got confirmed. Bobby Knuckles, Robert Goddamn Whittaker, one of my favorite fighters currently on the UFC roster, just a all-around stand-up guy, and a scary dude to fucking stand across in the octagon from. And this guy was going up against the overly inflated balloon animal that could knock your fucking block off in Paulo Costa. And my God, that was gonna be such an amazing fight. I was excited for it. And then, smash! I believe Costa got hurt, so he has to pull out. However, there's some good news that comes from this. However, I'm not as excited about the fight, so, I'm not gonna be super overly fanboyish about it, but a fight that probably could have happened way before, that probably should have happened way before, while Whittaker was champion and Gastelum was, I believe, interim champion or some shit like that. They were supposed to fight, but then I believe the event was saved by Izzy versus Anderson Silva. So there's that. But anyway, Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum steps in on short notice to face Whittaker on, I believe, April 17th is the fight date. And I'm excited for this one. Not as excited as I was for Costa, but it still has some backstory behind it. These two guys were supposed to square up at, I believe, UFC 234 in 2019. And unfortunately for us boyos here in the MMA community, Whittaker, I believe, got a hernia or a kidney stone or some real bad medical emergency that forced him to pull out. So Gastelum wasn't able to find an opponent literally on 24 hours notice, I believe it was. So he pulled out, and obviously the fight was replaced, or the main event was replaced with Israel Adesanya versus Anderson Silva, the old guard welcoming in the new officially. And it was a really nice main event, even though it was only 3 rounds. It would have been nice if it was 5 rounds. Would have been nice to see more. That being said, this has some backstory behind it also, because Gastelum during that event was walking around with a UFC belt, I believe a replica belt, saying that he was the interim champion, or that he was the official champion because Rob Whittaker forfeit, I guess is what he was saying, by some stupid fucking college wrestling rules as he was going by. So, there's just a little bit of beef behind this fight, but I don't think it's going to show much because Kelvin Gastelum is a little bit chill, and Whittaker is just an all-around good guy. He doesn't really like to beef with people. He'll talk his shit because he's Aussie, but, he's a good guy all around, and he's not really in it for a genuine beef. He just wants to fight, wants to make, he wants to make a revenue for his kids and make a good life for them, so I'm excited for that fight, but unfortunately we lost Whittaker versus Costa, and I was really excited for that fight, so, it's a little upsetting. But that being said, we have to talk about this one, because before I get into the next topic, I'm going to talk about the UFC 260 main card. And yes, y'all are going to be sitting here like, what the fuck? Why are you talking about the UFC 260 main card? What is there to talk about? So last night during the UFC broadcast, we got some very unfortunate news that Alexander Volkanovski had to pull out of his bout with Brian Ortega because he had contracted COVID. Unfortunately, sometimes you just can't control these things as much as you're trying to control the spread or whatever. These things happen. It's happened quite a bit. I've probably said that we've lost, I probably can count on my hands and feet right now how many fights we've lost in the time that I've been doing this podcast due to COVID. So, this isn't out of the ordinary. Just, very upsetting because I was actually really excited for this fight because Brian Ortega had looked incredible in his comeback fight against TKZ, and fucking Volkanovski, just a deadly powerhouse with that guy. A former fucking 200 and something pound rugby player who's cut down to 145 pounds and shows I used to lift guys way heavier than you fucking fruit baskets, and just slamming them to the dirt and just completely dominating them with his takedown defense and his takedowns. And both times, people think that he lost the second fight to Max, but both times just shutting down Max Holloway. So, it was exciting to see if Brian Ortega could be the one that puts down Volkanovski and takes away the title, or if Volkanovski is going to do it worse to Ortega than he did to Max, because, Ortega still might not be on that level yet. It was kind of like that. We're going to find out how good Ortega actually is after that Korean Zombie fight. So unfortunately that got pulled, and that brings me to the new card, because now we only have 4 fights. As of recording this, there still hasn't been another co-main event announced. So as of right now, the main card is only 4 fights, I believe, and those 4 fights are obviously the baddest rematch on the planet between Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou. The Croatian sensation versus the Ford Escort, which was kind of the story last time. The man who was the underdog but the champion against the man who could punch you so hard that it's like a Ford Escort hitting you at top speed. And that was confirmed by fucking scientists apparently. He holds the world record for the hardest punch. So just let's put that out there. But in the last fight, Stipe Miocic took a very inexperienced Francis Ngannou to the ground and just took him into deep waters throughout 5 rounds, winning a very dominant decision after weathering the storm. So we got the baddest rematch on the planet between the heavyweight champion Stipe Miocic and the Ford Escort Francis Ngannou. And then in the co-main event, our new co-main event is I'll beat ya ass, falling in and out of love with you, Tyron Woodley versus Vicente Luque, Lord Violence. So that's going to be a fun fight because Tyron Woodley needs another win. He has won, I believe, 10 rounds in a row now, 15 rounds in a row it has been. He lost 5 rounds to Kamaru Usman, 5 rounds to Gilbert Burns, and then 5 rounds to Colby Covington, which was probably the one that stung the most. But he has lost 15 rounds in a row. One of those rounds being ended by a verbal injury, a TKO. So, maybe 14 and a half rounds in a row. I don't know. But, he really can't risk to lose 3 more rounds. It's gonna look terrible on him, considering just a short time ago, about 3 years ago, he was on the top. He was the welterweight champion. People were comparing him with GSP and wanting him to match up with GSP to prove his legacy. And now here he is facing, I'm not kind of discounting Vicente Luque, but he's fighting Vicente Luque, and he's probably the furthest from a title shot that he's been since 2016, 2015, 2016 since he won the belt. So, he really needs to win this fight. But Vicente Luque is no easy matchup. The man, like I said, is Lord Violence. He's good with his takedown defense, really good with his takedowns as well, but his special foray, it may not be his base, but the thing he loves to do the most is beat the fuck out of you and leave some damage on your face and potentially put you out. He, like I said, he is Lord Violence. I love this guy, and personally, I usually don't really make predictions in this, but fuck it. I'm going to say it here on the podcast. I said it about Ashley Yoder, and thank God, last week's prelims, she lost, so I didn't have to. Actually, no, I believe the fight was... Never mind, they fought, and Angela Hill won. Never mind. So I didn't have to eat a shoe. But if Tyron Woodley actually manages to beat Vicente Luque, I will eat my shoe again, and I will pin it as my tweet, and... I'll eat it on... As awkward as it'll sound, I'll eat the shoe on audio for the podcast. Fuck it. But I just... the way that unless Tyron Woodley has just found some random fucking like, urge to fight, I don't see him winning this fight. I see him either getting finished, maybe, or we're gonna see him lose another 3 rounds in a row, and then we're gonna make that 18 or 17 and a half rounds in a row that he's lost, and then it's gonna beg the question: what's next for Tyron Woodley? He's 19-6. He used to have a really good record of 19-3, but obviously he's on a 3-fight losing streak now. Just all 3 of those losses, he was dominated from starting bell to finish bell. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. If he loses, what's going to happen to Tyron. I hope for the best, honestly. But, it's going to be interesting to see how this fight goes and what happens next. And then after that, the third fight, the featured bout, is Sean O'Malley versus Thomas Almeida. Sean O'Malley obviously making a return since UFC, I believe, 251 or something like that. After he got leg kicked so hard, he decided to quit and couldn't stand up. Just kidding, by the way. He got kicked in the perennial nerve and or the peroneal nerve or something like that, where like all feeling and just mobility to his ankles stopped. And it was just like rubber, so he couldn't use it, which is a genuine way to lose. So he genuinely got TKO'd that way, because after he dropped, he ate a couple of shots, and I saw after he got hit with a couple elbows from Cheeto, he stiffened up a tiny bit. So either he got stunned or he was, or he was knocked out. I don't care. He lost that fight, so he's coming back from that loss against Thomas Almeida, who is no slouch either and has been a veteran in the bantamweight division. So it's going to be exciting to see how that fight's going to go. And then Kama Worthy, the man who was supposed to fight Ottoman Azatar, who, as you guys know, a while back got released from the UFC due to breaking COVID protocol, but he's since gotten his contract back. He's going up against Jamie Malarkey to open up the main card. So that's the 260 main card for right now that we know of. 3 of those 4 fights sound fire. I mean, I don't know much about Jamie Malarkey. I know quite a bit about Kama Worthy, though. So, that could definitely be a good fight to start the card. But so far, those are the 4 fights we got. Anyway, the last of the news before I get into the event actually brings us into this week's event. So, while weighing in for this week's event, a woman weighed in by the name of, I think her name was like Julia Storyolenko. And so while weighing in, she fainted on the scale. She legit fainted, like dropped. I don't know if she hit her head, but she fainted. She lost consciousness. She was out cold. Apparently they got her back up to weigh in properly, and then she did it again, and they took her off in a stretcher. So she was bad enough that they had to scratch the fight completely off the card. And that begs the question, before I get into the fights, about weight cutting, because this isn't the first time that a fighter has fainted on the scale due to weight cutting. It's not the first time that a fighter has fainted, during weight cuts, during the process of weight cutting during camp. So, essentially, for those who are uninformed, like, weight cutting is pretty hard on the body because you're somewhat starving yourself, trying to keep a lean diet. And in the meantime, to some point, it's not as bad sometimes, but, while you're, trying to eat that healthy diet and somewhat kind of starve yourself, you're pretty much draining your body of like its water supply, the 75% water that we're made of. You're draining your body of that so much that it can't replenish fast enough, so you're cutting weight. And that's dangerous to your organs. It's a lot on your organs, a lot on your body. And fighters can do it with with proper information, a proper plan if done properly. But sometimes it just doesn't go to plan, and sometimes shit like that happens. But weight cutting is pretty bad, and it's a part of the sport, so I accept it as a part of a sport. But it's how do I put this? how long until somebody at the pro level, at the top level, dies due to like during a weight cut? This isn't a known issue. Like, no, I think only one fighter in pro MMA, not top level, but in professional MMA, has died due to a weight cut. But like, how long in the UFC until these this weight cut bullshit kills someone and they change their fucking shit? Because at one, weight cutting, it's a little bit more lenient in Asia. The flyweight division is like 135 pounds. Their featherweight division is like 155. Their welterweight division's 165 or something like that. Their middleweight's like 190. Their light heavyweight's like 210. Their heavyweight's like 265. So it leaves a bit more room for people when they're weight cutting. And I like that because it's shown that weight cutting is a lot easier for those fights than it is for a fight in the UFC under those types of rules. So I want to know what you guys think, what you guys would change about weight cutting. But I think I think changing the weight class is similar to what ONE FC is doing, like what One Championship is doing. I think doing weight classes similar to that would probably help come fight night and come weigh-ins. With the weigh-ins and the weight cuts, you'd have a lot less fighters practically killing themselves, a lot better performances, a lot more motivated performances. It'd be a little bit safer for the fighters to drop weight. I think that would be a start, but obviously this is obviously a controversial topic. I could make an entire podcast just talking about weight cutting and debating it with people and discussing it with people. It's just one of those topics that's it's a part of the sport and it has to be a part of the sport, but at the same time it's so dangerous and controversial. Like, you need to debate how to properly do it. So that's gonna be it for me, just talking about it. But anyway, that brings us into last night's card. So just before I get into last night's card, because the first fight of the night on the prelims is going to actually kind of connect to the featured bout, not the co-main, but the bout before it. Yet another married couple is fighting currently in the UFC, and they were making their UFC debuts last night. JP and Cheyenne Bays, or Bays, as they like to pronounce it, even though it clearly is spelt Bays. Anyway, they were making their debuts in their respective divisions last night. JP making his first, making his debut first. And it was a good fight. Very back and forth in the first round, but Bruno Silva started to slow JP down, started to really kind of get his rhythm and kind of time JP. And by the second round, he was hitting JP with some heavy shots and just threatening a finish, and, actually had him hurt near the midway through the second round. Let him get up, and JP was trying to fight back, trying to counter, but Bruno just hit him with a nice right hook that just dropped him flat on his, not on his face, but flat on his knees and his face kind of, and it was clear he was out. The ref stepped in and Bruno Silva got a KO. And then if that wasn't enough for you, the next fight was Montel Jackson versus Jesse Straiter, and Montel Jackson just ran through Jesse Straiter by finishing him via knockout. And it was brutal. But the fight, and I was even saying this on Twitter last night, the fight that I was surprised that didn't replace what was the co-main event tonight that was going to be good. Oh, Gregor Gillespie. Not tonight, last night, sorry. Gregor Gillespie versus Brad Riddell was supposed to happen, but I believe either an injury or COVID forced that fight off on 24 hours notice. And I was surprised that this upcoming fight between Trevin Giles and Roman Dolidze wasn't thrown onto the main card to kind of fill it up a bit. This was a great fight between two guys who were technically sound, had incredible power, and were on a fucking tear. Roman Dolidze was on a 8-fight winning streak. He was undefeated going into this bout. Had incredible wrestling and power in his hands, where I think in his last fight he actually finished the fight via TKO on the ground, so it was incredible that way. And then Trevin Giles just was on a knockout streak, and just, if you look at his highlights in the last couple fights, it shows he can fucking bang. So this was a very back and forth fight where Trevin Giles was picking his shots very, very good, very precisely, hitting them very well on Roman Dolidze. And Roman Dolidze was threatening to take down a lot, and he landed a couple, but Trevin Giles just, overall was doing a great job throughout the rounds, defending those takedowns. It was a back and forth affair between both guys, and I believe that the score was like 29-28 at the end of it. It was just a fun fight. Definitely one of those fights where I was sitting there like, what the fuck? Why wasn't this on the main card? Like, this should have been thrown on the main card in the first place. But nonetheless, a good fight by both guys, a good win by Trevin Giles, and honestly, even though Roman Dolidze lost, I'm actually still excited to see how he fights in the octagon next, because even though he lost that fight, that was a great showcase by him. He fought a hard opponent in Trevin Giles, and I'm sorry, I may have just have a biased hard-on for that fight, but I really enjoyed that fight. I'm just going to be honest here. The next fight, though, was also incredibly fun, where we had Leonardo Santos versus Grant Dawson at lightweight, and it was a pretty back-and-forth fight between both guys until like the end of the third round, where Grant Dawson had Leonardo Santos hurt and just started pouring it on him. And as the seconds were fucking tearing down, the ref steps in and Grant finishes Leonardo Santos with like 1 second to spare on the clock at the end of the third round. So that was really exciting. But then it brought our fight, the fight of the night for the prelims at least, the main event of the prelims, Marion Renault versus Macy Chiasson. And nothing of note here. Marion Renault with a very subpar record. Macy Chiasson with a very incredible record, and she's an up-and-comer. Very nothing notable. Great showcase by Macy altogether. Nothing really to talk about here. Let's talk about the actual reason why you guys are here. You know, the fucking main card, the reason why you guys wanted to listen to this in the first place. I'm sure you guys are excited to hear how the event went. So let's just get into it. And the first fight of the night that opened up the main card, was a heavyweight bout between Tai Tuivasa and Harry Hunsucker, who was on the Dana White's Contender Series this year, I believe. I actually believe I covered one of the fights on my podcast. Tai Tuivasa has been in the UFC for a good while. He's had some pretty great fucking fights against some guys like, I believe he's fought like Junior Dos Santos and Curtis Blades and shit like that. He's just a guy with like a 50% overall record in the UFC, but with heavy hands. He's always exciting. He's always looking to excite the fans. You know, he's never out there to put on boring fights. So it was, both guys were strikers who just love to brawl and throw down. So it was expected to be a fun fight. However, I didn't expect the fight to be as quick as it was. So Harry Hunsucker comes out like a lightning bolt and starts throwing some shots. Tai Tuivasa's trying to piece him up, trying to just think about how he's going to do this, coming in every now and then. And he got hit by like a quick 1-2 by Harry Hunsucker, but it didn't hurt him. And then as the clock starts to count down, like within 40 seconds into the first round, Tai Tuivasa hits him with a left that kind of hurts him and stuns him, wobbles him back. And then Tai Tuivasa starts following, running him down, hits him with another left-right. That drops him, and then he gets him back up to the feet, where he hits him with another right. That just drops him to the ground and causes Harry Hunsucker to cover up, where Tai Tuivasa just pours on the shots. And unfortunately for Harry Hunsucker, the ref steps in, and Harry Hunsucker was just there, pretty much curling up in a ball trying to defend himself at that point. So good fight by Tai Tuivasa. And if that knockout wasn't enough, we got a back-and-forth bout between bantamweights, Adrian Yanez and Gustavo Lopez, my bad. Adrian Yanez, I talked about earlier this year in the podcast. Late last year, I guess, technically. He was on the Contender Series with an incredible TKO and got his contract that way. And then his first fight in the UFC, he won a head kick knockout of the night. So, I was really high up on this kid, but Gustavo Lopez was no slouch either. He was coming into this on a win streak, where his last fight, he actually submitted Anthony Bierchak in the first round by a brutal rear naked choke. So I was just kind of high on both guys coming into this fight, and I was excited for it. And I got what I expected. I got what I signed up for. I was so fucking happy that this fight happened. It was technicality and speed versus power and I guess just precision. Gustavo Lopez was more of a looper puncher, while Adrian Yanez was a jab, quick puncher, and we got exactly that with this fight. I was so happy that we got this with this fight. Both guys just going back and forth, most of the fight taking place on the feet, trading shots. At one point, Gustavo Lopez had Adrian Yanez hurt just a little bit, but Adrian Yanez was just completely walking down Gustavo Lopez with his speed, and then come in the third round. Only 27 seconds into the third round, Gustavo Lopez is coming out like a lightning bolt, knowing that he's potentially down 2 rounds to none. And, he hits a good couple shots on Adrian Yanez, backs up, and then comes in for another flurry. But Adrian Yanez this time counters with a nice, right hand. He hits a left first to kind of set it up, and then hits this, lightning quick. I'm telling you, a lightning quick right hand that you barely could see that just drops Gustavo Lopez onto the ground flat, and you can tell he's out cold. The ref just immediately runs and steps in. It was a nice finish by Adrian Yanez. I wouldn't doubt it if he got knockout of the night for that, but also there was probably better knockouts like the Tai Tuivasa one last night. But it was just such a fun fight to watch. Definitely will go back and watch that again, especially the finish, because it was just so quick and so nice. Honestly, it was just a great fight to watch. And that led us into a women's strawweight bout. As I said earlier, we had JP Buys open up the prelims, and now we have his wife on the main card, the third fight from the main event. Cheyenne Bays versus Monstera Ruiz. And this fight was nothing of note. I'm not going to get too into it. I'm just going to probably talk about kind of what the 3 rounds kind of had in store. It was boring. I'm going to say that. Even as someone who loves grappling, it was fucking boring. The entire fight was Ruiz on top, with Cheyenne Bays in a scarf hold, threatening a scarf choke and landing shots, while Cheyenne Bays is trying to get out of that scarf hold, and at the very last second of each round, just slipping out of that scarf hold and getting top control. And then obviously the next round starting on the feet, only for it to land in that scarf hold again. That was the entire fight. Cheyenne Bays was absolutely helpless to Ruiz's ground game, and Cheyenne Bays couldn't even get her stand-up going, really, which was very disappointing, obviously, to Cheyenne Bays, but just in general for people who were excited for these two to make their debut. But like I said, nothing to really talk about in the actual fight itself. It was what happened as soon as the bell for the third round ending rang is what we're going to be talking about. So I watched the fight again this morning before I recorded this, and I didn't see a spit on Cheyenne Bays, but I did see Ruiz mouth something to Cheyenne Bays that heated Cheyenne Bays up. So Cheyenne Bays claims that Ruiz spit on her as the bell rang, but I didn't see that. But obviously something heated Bays up, which caused both of them to start lipping each other off and almost going at each other, where the doctors, the ref, and their corners had to come in and separate the two, while Ruiz was celebrating and yelling obscenities in Spanish. Cheyenne Bays was in her corner screaming at Ruiz and threatening Ruiz, saying she's going to follow Ruiz home tonight, and shit like that. And it was just a fucking ridiculous, and I mean it when I say ridiculous, display after the fight. I don't know, maybe Cheyenne Bays said something while they were on the ground, and so Ruiz called her a puta, because that's what a lot of people are claiming is what Ruiz said was puta. And Cheyenne Bays didn't like that and got heated about it and then started going off on her own shit. And started showing her shitty personality. So there's that. But anyway, Ruiz won by a very dominant, like, I wouldn't say super dominant. Some of the refs had one round for Cheyenne Bays for some reason, but Ruiz won a 29-28, 29-28, and a 29-27 decision. And that led us into our new co-main event after the Gregor Gillespie one was scrapped. The co-main event between Song Kanon and Max Griffin. And I was excited for this because Song Kanon is an up-and-coming Chinese prospect, and he's, got hands, and he's an all-around fighter. But Max Griffin, every time he steps into that octagon, just puts a man out. Just fucking knocks a motherfucker out. And it's fun to watch. And that is exactly what happened. So it started off a little bit slow for both guys. Song kind of getting the better of the exchanges in the first round. But after like the first minute kind of went off, both guys started to kind of get their groove. Max Griffin started to really get into his game, started landing his shots. But so did Song. Song didn't back down. Song was landing some decent shots. But going into like 2 minutes into the first round, Max Griffin hits Song Kanon with this like 1-2 jab combo that's like that while he's backing up, while Song Kanon's kind of like leaning away, that hits Kanon hard and flattens him on his face. Literally flattens him flat on his face, and got Max Payne the knockout. And if that isn't knockout of the night, then I'm surprised, because we had quite a few knockouts, but that one was just so nice, where he just flattened the man. Like, he was still, like, Song Kanon was still flat on his face for at least a good minute or two after the knockout. That's how bad he dropped. So, that being said, that brings us into the main event of the evening, which was between Derek Brunson, the man who just loves to derail hype trains, and Kevin Holland, the hype train that can't be derailed, and the man who just loves to talk. And actually, I believe he called for this fight. He'd been calling out Derek Brunson for a while, talking shit about Derek Brunson, calling him a bum and a gatekeeper and all this stuff, and saying that he looks like Cisco, which this new Cisco Derek Brunson is just a new level of middleweight, and I'm excited to see how well he does. But anyway, this fight, again, I'm going to say it just like the Cheyenne Bays fight, this was not anything of note. The entire fight was Kevin Holland trying to get his striking going, but Derek Brunson doing better and then landing takedowns after he gets the better striking. And just Kevin Holland not really trying once he got to the ground. Like, Kevin Holland landed, a few shots every now and then to keep the offense going on the ground, but, like, it just seemed like he didn't really try to get off the ground. Derek Brunson was just landing shots on him while Kevin Holland talked to him from his back. And it was just a very clear decision win by Derek Brunson. For all 5 rounds, we just had Kevin Holland talking his shit on his back, while Derek Brunson just laid on top of him and landed shots and just kind of won the fight in the judges' eyes. Everybody's going to be like, well, Derek Brunson fought a boring fight. No, Derek Brunson fought a smart fight, and Kevin Holland's fight IQ was just pure retardation, because he didn't try to get up. He didn't really try to transition or try to scramble. He just punched from the back until the round was over, and talked to his opponent, which, yeah, you can talk to your opponent. That's great and all. It kind of brings down their fucking morale. But, like, when you're on your back eating shots and you're just not doing anything to get up off your back, I don't think you should be talking. Especially since I feel like he kind of treated Derek Brunson on top of him like he did Jacare, where he was expecting Jacare to kind of create a bit of distance while Kevin Holland kind of clipped him with that shot, but none of that happened, and Derek Brunson just very handily beat him. And it was really disappointing because I wanted Holland to win, but at the same time, I'm really happy for Derek Brunson because, yet again, he just shuts all the naysayers up like he did last time with Edmund Shabazian. Everybody thinking, oh yeah, Shabazian's ready for this test. I mean, not me. I was one of those guys that's like, oh, Jesus, they're throwing him to Brunson right away. But like it's clear that up until now, maybe obviously I'm guessing Derek Brunson's performance didn't impress Dana as much, but I have a feeling that Dana just might stop making Derek Brunson the gatekeeper to the middleweight division, honestly, because it seems pretty much every time he is that gatekeeper, he derails the hype train they're trying to, fucking smash through those gates. So, a little bit part of me feels like he's not happy with Derek Brunson's performance, and he might give Brunson another contender, like another up-and-comer, or maybe he might give Brunson a fucking contender that he deserves now. But anyway, he did actually say that he was not impressed with Kevin Holland's performance last night, that he didn't do anything to try and fucking earn his win, that like literally all he did was talk, and that's exactly what he did, was talk his fucking shit, and it was so annoying. Usually I like that shit, but it was so fucking annoying. My goddamn word. But anyway, that being said, we've got other fights coming up in the next little while, but I actually wanted to talk about the UFC 261 card before I end the podcast. The entire event for Brunson versus Holland was okay. The main event was a bust because it was just Brunson completely raping Kevin Holland the whole time while Kevin Holland acted like an idiot. So it wasn't the best. But that being said, UFC 260 is a bit in trouble, like we said. But UFC 261, I'm hoping, won't be, because yet again, Kamaru Usman, my friends, he headlines yet another pay-per-view where 3 title fights are scheduled to go off. Right now, the official main card reads as I follow. Main event, Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal 2 for the welterweight title. Co-main event is Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas. I believe that is a first fight for them. And then after that, the third featured bout, which is also a title fight, is Valentina Shevchenko versus the new flyweight Jessica Andrade, the knockout queen. And then to open up the main card so far, we've got a great fight in veteran contender Anthony Smith and up-and-coming light heavyweight Jimmy Crute. So the main card is looking incredible. I can't wait. UFC 260 might be a little bit in trouble, but the card itself looks pretty decent. And if that's what we have to sacrifice for this card, give me it. Give me all of it, because I cannot wait for those 4 fights in general, especially the 3 title fights. Those 3 title fights are going to be incredible. Of course, I feel like Kamaru Usman's just going to foot stomp his way to victory again, as you do, as you need to. But I expect something special out of Valentina Shevchenko versus Andrade and Weili Zhang versus Rose Namajunas, because Namajunas is an incredible grappler and always brings the fight, even though she's had some trouble with her PTSD or whatever in the past. And then the Valentina Shevchenko fight and Jessica Andrade, Shevchenko is just an all-around sound fighter and a great kickboxer, and Jessica Andrade has a chin out of hell now that she's out of strawweight and she's in flyweight. Plus, now that she's not cutting as much weight, she's got a bit more power in her hands. So I'm not saying that Valentina's gonna lose, because I feel like she might win this fight, but it's definitely a fight to look out for, because there is a chance that Jessica Andrade can win, and it's making the fight interesting. All in all, UFC 261 is looking to be an incredible card, and I'm excited for it. That is going to be April 24th, but UFC 260 is next weekend, and with that, we are going to have the baddest rematch on the planet, and I can't wait for that. So I will see you guys next weekend when I cover all the news that happened, all the new fights that are announced, and finally, UFC 260. And hopefully, the Ford Escort isn't the new heavyweight champion. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you guys enjoy all the episodes. Keep listening. All of my episodes are on podcast at Dillo's Dojo Podcast. I also have some minis that you can tune into if this isn't your cup of tea. So go check those out. I cover a wide range of topics, from stupid shit that happens on social media to just reading stupid Reddit posts to serious shit that's happened in Burma and Nigeria. Go check those out at those minis. But if you are still an MMA fan like this and you've listened this long, listen to some of my other episodes where I covered the other events and the other news that happened in the last weeks, the last months, the last year, to be honest, since I started this podcast. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next episode, and I will see you guys in the next mini. Peace out, guys.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.